Mackenzie, just to make sure I have that. Sharing the screen. I don't see that option.
On the bottom should be like a green.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. So somebody in here is doing a commercial lease right now? Is that true?
I think Tanya isn't she?
I was gonna say, are you doing it, Tanya? You were telling me the other day that you had one going on.
Yeah, I'm going back and forth between it.
Okay.
One minute he wants it, the next minute he doesn't. So I'm working through it.
Gotcha. Okay. So I will just kind of go through the steps of up into agreeing to a lease term. How I work with clients from when they tell me what they are looking for, and then how I find it, how I negotiate the deal, and then how the lease actually comes to fruition there at the end. So I guess, as y'all know, it's definitely different. Searching for properties for lease are rarely even in the MLS. Sometimes they are. So you can start in the MLS and cross-reference, but the majority of the properties are going to be in LoopNet. So Tanya, I'm sure you know that just by, they are, if it's not in LoopNet, it's probably not, it could be on some of the agents' websites alone too. That happens a lot, especially in Waco, but in the Austin market, most of them are probably in LoopNet. And then if you have access to CoStar, which they're all kind of integrated now, but CoStar even has more information. But basically what you're going to, and sometimes it requires just driving down the road in the area your client wants to be in and taking pictures of signs and calling that broker or agent, after you're done looking. That happens a lot, especially with retail, because they might just have a strip center, and on 3 of the 10 windows, there's a for lease sign, but it's not really on LoopNet, or if it is, sometimes it's hard to find it like that. So that's a good thing to do if you have a client that knows where they want to be. And a lot of times I found also, if they're actively looking for a space to start a business, they're super motivated and they already have looked, and they'll even say, hey, well, what about the space over in the Commons Center? And then, obviously in most cases, if they can't pinpoint the spot, just drive over there if you can, or look it up and Google it. So that's basically what I do when I'm told that someone's looking for something. Um, Say it's like a warehouse, in LoopNet, you can go and narrow it down just like Zillow or just like any other big um, search tool for real estate. But narrow it down with either retail, industrial/warehouse, flex space. You can narrow it down by square footage. I'm going to share my screen on what I look for when I'm searching LoopNet. I don't usually just send the link to my client. You can share a link off of LoopNet, but 9 times out of 10, if it's marketed decently, well, the listing agent will have an offering packet linked at the bottom. So if you go in and you look at it, it'll usually have a PDF file attached, and that will kind of you can just email it on to your client. That's what I do. I did a property last year that I'm just going to show you all the offering packet that I found on LoopNet, and then the LOI that I did to get the negotiation started, and some of the other like key information that's very commercial only terminology that was used in the deal. So let me find that real quick here. We'll start with the flyer. See if I can share this with y'all. Is Mackenzie still on here? For some reason. Oh, wait, I have it in a window. Y'all can't see that, right? Sorry. Okay. Well, I had the tab as a PDF download, so that's why I'm having a hard time sharing between screens. Let me look here. Okay. Tanya, do you happen to know, is Mackenzie still here? How to share a PDF file screen? Or Mackenzie, do you know how to share the screen?
It says on the bottom, I'm on my phone. That's why my face looks less than beautiful like it usually does. I know. But on the bottom, if you hit the share button, my choices come up: Google Drive, Box, Photo, Document. Maybe click the document.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go on the share screen at the top, it'll have like basic, advanced files or apps. Go up to the files. Do you have that?
I have Chrome tab, window, or entire screen.
Oh,
Maybe
share
this
your
is-
share it. If it's open in a different tab, say tab or window, and then go back and click that PDF.
Okay. I see where it says that.
Or maybe you could even do entire screen, because if it's up on your screen, we should be able to see it.
Yeah, that'll be easy too.
Hi, it's Kelly. Sorry I'm late.
No, I see you. So, do y'all see my entire screen now?
No.
That's so weird.
Click the screen again.
Okay. And I hit share. It's not doing it.
Hmm.
Okay. I really need to show y'all that, but I guess I can just talk about it.
If it's a PDF, you should also be able to drop it in the chat.
Okay, let me try that.
Look at us and our technology skills. We're learning so much.
Okay. And I did put it on my text. There we go. So I just put it in there. It's loading. It's a long one, but you'll see it in a second. So we'll pull it up and I'll tell you what page you can look at.
Okay, it's in the chat, so we can share it that way. We can look at it then.
Okay, great. All right. So if you pull that up, a lot of times if it's a retail center or even a big office space, sometimes even a warehouse, they'll have it available. Square footage will be a range. So if you look on that second page, it shows anywhere from 1,233 square feet to 3,676. So it's divisible down to the lowest number, or you could have a maximum amount of space of the 3,676. This particular package had a lot of information, so it was a very good one. Some of this information, sometimes you're only going to find out by calling the broker. But in this case, I was able to tell my client that the lease rate that they were looking for was $22 a foot a year. So obviously you would times that by the square footage you would want to use and then divide it by 12 to find the monthly rate. And that in this case was the base rate. This shows a TI allowance. TI allowance stands for tenant improvement allowance. So this case, the property was in shell condition. they'll either say shell condition or white box condition, and that means that it has never been completely done. So it's ready for a tenant to make it what they want it to be. So in her case, she was going to do a retail store for clothing, so a clothing boutique. So it was completely white box. There was not AC, there was no electrical, there was nothing in there. Because of that, the landlord is offering $25 a square foot in TI allowance. And so the reason they do that is because you are essentially, as a tenant, finishing out their space, but you're not going to own it. So you're not going to see that money back. So you're finishing out their space, so they're offering you money to do it, essentially. The way the TI allowance works, usually you are reimbursed at the very end of the project. So when you receive your CO or certificate of occupancy is when the landlord will reimburse your client this allowance money. A lot of times, it's very smart for your client to get multiple bids with contractors. Everybody's going to bid differently. A lot of times it's not going to cover all the amount that the landlord's willing to give you. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it comes in under. It just depends. So all of that is decided up front in the lease. It's not like on a sliding scale. The TI allowance would be set on what you agreed upon in the lease. So moving down this packet, you could
Evan,
see,
can you see my screen?
yes.
Okay. Well, you can tell me if you want me to scroll down or up.
Yeah, keep scrolling down a little bit, please. Go all the way down to, one more. Perfect. Okay, so this part, the lease spaces, this is where it breaks it down to where you can tell how they had that range in square footage. So in this particular case, we were dealing with suite 4, so it was 1,233 square feet. This tells you the lease type, which is in this case triple net, which means that the tenant is responsible for the real estate taxes, the building insurance, and the common area maintenance. A lot of times you see it as CAM or CAM. So that is tacked on to the base rent. So I think in this case, they were saying it was $22 a foot a year. Well, it's really not. So most of the time you would have to call the broker and ask them what they estimate the triple net to be. They cannot usually give you a perfect number because taxes fluctuate and sometimes the tax bill's not in at the time of the packet was sent out. But they give you an estimated amount. Even the maintenance can change occasionally. All those things can change. In this case, they did tell us what it was. I believe it was $6.50 a foot a year. So really the rate was more like 22, so $28.50 is what they're looking at a month. The other options that you can come across in commercial leases other than triple net is gross, modified gross, and full service. Gross would be the tenant pays all utilities, but they're not responsible for, the real estate taxes, the building insurance, and the common area maintenance. So you could kind of think of like a residential lease. As a tenant, you would pay, your electric bill, your water bill, trash, all that good stuff, but you're not paying for the taxes for that property, etc. Modified gross, you see this. I didn't see this too much in Austin. I see it more in Waco, but that would be where the tenant pays like part of those expenses. So maybe they pay the internet and the cable and maybe the water, and the landlord might pay the electricity or the other way around. It's just some of the expenses are shared between the landlord and tenant. Sometimes that happens a lot, like if it is a retail center and there's like happens to be one water meter, the landlord might elect to just pay it all for all their tenants to avoid any type of discrepancies. Full service, that is where the landlord pays everything. So the complete opposite of gross. So those are basically the only options you'll come across most likely as far as terminology that is different. You can see on this page the status. Again, it was in white box status, so that was that term I was saying whenever it's not built out at all yet. If you scroll down some more, Mackenzie, keep going a little bit. Okay, one more, sorry. Right there. So this is the space. That's what it looks like in white box condition. It's they literally have nothing up. It's just framed out like that. So in this particular instance, we met multiple contractors, and the bidding can go range by $40,000 to $50,000. It's crazy, but that's why you want to go ahead and make sure you do that ahead of time, because let's say this guy only wanted to do $25 a foot in TI allowance, and it was going to cost her a minimum of $45 a foot. It might be a deal breaker for your client if they can't find somebody to do it for the amount of money that they're going to allow them to do it. And keep in mind too, they might have to take out a personal loan. Who knows how they might finance that, because they're not going to get the reimbursed money until the certificate of occupancy is issued by the city. So a lot of people go into these thinking, oh, I'm going to do this part of the phase, then I'm going to get paid, and then I'm going to get this part, and then they're going to reimburse me. And then this part, it doesn't work like that. It has to be completely done, because you're not going to convince a landlord to pay you and then think, well, what if they don't want to finish the job and then they leave and then they're left with half a building that looks like a boutique, but the next guy that wants to come rent it wants to put in a coffee shop. So that's why they don't do that. Because I have had clients ask me if I could negotiate that, and 9 times out of 10, they're not going to do that unless they're just, maybe they're not represented very well, or they don't know what they're doing on the landlord side. Let me see if there's any other information in this that we can talk about before. Okay, so that's basically what I look at whenever I'm looking on LoopNet. I see a property I think I might like. I go down, I find this flyer, and then I will download it and email it to my client and say, look this over, does this look like something you'd be interested in? And then I would then call the broker, and ask them the details, when it's available, all those good things. But a lot of that information will be seen in LoopNet. Okay, now I would like to show y'all an LOI. So let's say that they are moving forward, they like it, they think that they could make it work. And this is kind of the rule of thumb of how I negotiate. Now you could do it differently, but let me put this in the chat of a draft here real quick.
Evan, do you want me to pull this up as well?
If you don't mind, please.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right, so this document is just a TREC form, a Texas Realtors form. So this is non-binding. You can have your client sign it, initial it, and the landlord's client sign it, initial it, and it could be an executed document, but it's not binding. This is just to start negotiations. Sometimes in commercial leases, you don't even get to you don't even do an application. Your client doesn't even do an application. In fact, out of the deals I've done, I've only had one listing agent come back to me and say, have your client fill out this commercial application for me, please. Everywhere else, we do this, we agree to these terms. They might then ask for, their P&L statements. If they're financing a build out, they want to know how they're going to finance that. You know, they have guarantors, what they might ask for bank statements. All of the above I have seen. Sometimes I've even seen where they don't ask for anything. It's kind of crazy, other than they want to see the formation documents of the LLC or something like that. But on the tenant's representative side, you're really just kind of waiting to see what they are going to require. You may not need any of these things. It's actually, I would say, somewhat easy to be a tenant's representative because you're not doing a whole bunch of work. A lot of it is on the landlord's agent, is up to them. So in this case, the landlord, most of the time you don't know, because you saw what I was looking at with that offering packet. There's not a whole bunch of information. If it's not in the MLS, they're not required to disclose much of anything. So I leave it blank. For my tenant, I put in, you know, their information, the lease premises. So in this case, Suite 4 was really the only thing I needed to make sure was in there. The term. So before we look at this, I'll just kind of give a brief background of the situation like this. If it's in white box condition, you know you're not going to be running your business in there for at least a couple months, because it's going to take some time to get that started and completed before you're going to actually move in there and start making money. So the landlord knows that. And I'm telling you that they're expecting to get asked to give free rent. So in this case, I think I even started at maybe, I guess we started at 4 months. So, and they gave 4 months free rent. So this is where you would say you're going to ask for free rent. And we already know that they're going to give TI money because it is in white box condition, and they already offered it in the offering packet. Sometimes those conversations you can have with the landlord prior to even doing this and kind of see, would they give more? Is that a set number? You know, where do you feel like you would be? Kind of like you would with residential, writing an offer up. If you have a conversation before doing it with the agent, seeing where they're at and presenting it. So in this case, I knew that they would need at least 4 months to do the work they needed to do. I knew she wanted to do a 5-year term. You can do as low as a 2-year, maybe as low as a year, probably not. The more years you agree to, the better chance you have at getting a reduced rate per month. So in this case, we chose to go ahead and ask for 4 months. And then our monthly rate, we did $22 a foot per month. And then that gives you your annual rate and then your base monthly rent. So you want to go ahead and line it out. You can put the actual dates, but I did not know when it would actually be starting, considering that we are going to ask for 4 months free. And to keep in mind, again, this is just to get the conversation started. It doesn't have to be perfect. And so that's what I did here for 5 months, and I kept the rate the same. Now, it's not likely that they would agree to that. They're usually going to do an escalation of at least 25 cents a foot every year. I didn't do that because I was just going to see where they would fall. So that's what we presented them. And then in the additional rent, you would do, this is where you would mark, if it's triple net, you would mark all these boxes because those are the things you're responsible for. And then the second box is you want to not go in excess of a base year of $6.50. So basically, you're not going to be able to charge more than that, is what that says. Okay. These next 2 boxes, the percentage rent and the parking, those are rarely filled out unless you know ahead of time that there is money to be owed for parking. Mackenzie, if you want to go to the second page now. I don't know where she went. Is she on here? Mackenzie? All right. Well, sorry guys, I don't know.
Sorry, y'all. I was making my lunch.
Okay. All right, yeah, we're just on page 2. Okay, so renewal options. You always probably want to go ahead and give yourself at least one renewal option. You know, if your business is, they probably have a pretty far out plan. So you might not want to just give up your space in 5 years. So in this case, we're giving 2 5-year renewal options. So a total of 15 years she could have this space. Security deposit is usually 1 month's rent, just like it would be for residential. I know that's less than what it is base monthly, so I think they did come back and request the 2260 or whatever we agreed to. Tenants use, just obviously disclose what they're trying to do with the space. Sometimes the landlord might not want that there. It is up to them. Improvements, if it was a second generation, I forgot to mention that. A lot of times, if it's already been built out before, they'll list it as second generation, like restaurant. So you know, if your client's trying to put in a restaurant, you might put that in there, second generation restaurant. But if it is second generation office and you're putting in an office, it's likely that they're not going to give you any TI money for that because it's already built out for the use that it is intended for. This case, it wasn't, so that's what we put in there for tenant improvement. And then that is box number 2 to be completed by the tenant. And then that's where you would put the amount of money that you would want to be given in allowance. And then just always put you're representing the tenant. And then, okay, so commissions. Usually you can get 4% of the base monthly rent. I've seen it 2%, I've seen it 3% a lot, and sometimes I get 4%. But always start at 4% because that is kind of the going rate for commercial. And then it's very typical that 1/2 is paid at the lease execution, and then the other half is when the lease commences. So that's kind of the only downfall here. You know, if you're working on a brand new space, the lease is actually not going to commence if you do get your client 4 months of free rent, 4 months from the day that you started, right? So that might take a long time to get paid that second half. So sometimes that happens. In the special provisions, I usually always put that if there is for free rent, this is where I put that. I mean, I also calculate it at the first page, but you just want to put free rent there. You can put this line in here if there's if it's triple net, you can put that. It's not necessarily necessary. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And then landlord to reimburse all monies, including any TI allowance used to tenant if space is not delivered to tenant on or before. So this was a very specific thing because there was a different situation we were dealing with the space the landlord was responsible for. So this was not something that you would probably want to put in. But you do want to put in landlord to allow tenant to begin construction on space upon execution of the lease. So just to cover your own bases, like once you sign that, you can go in and start working. I would always put that in there. If you are getting a second generation space and you're not, putting in your own AC, I would put a line in there saying landlord to deliver, to inspect and deliver ACs in working condition, or just some kind of language verbiage that they need to inspect all the ACs before you go in to your space that they're in working condition. And then the last page, just put if you want them to respond relatively quickly, you can pick a date, and then obviously have your client sign it. But that is really all I do for LOIs. I just have them sign it. And again, you can send this to the landlord's agent. They can sign it. It is not like a binding. It's not saying you have to sign the lease, you have to do anything. This is just to get the conversation started. From here, it's usually bounced back a couple times. They might redline it, and then y'all come to terms on situations. On sometimes the base monthly rent might change a little. But after that, typically you can come to a agreement, and landlord's agent will write up a lease. It's probably like 50-50 whether they use a Texas realtor's lease or if they use their own promulgated lease done by an attorney. I've seen both of them, about 50% different. In that case, if it's a Texas realtor's lease, you're probably pretty good to look at it yourself and feel confident that everything looks good. If it's like a pretty big, long lease that's not a Texas realtor's lease, I would advise your client to have an attorney look over it, because that lease is going to favor the landlord, and you don't know what's all in it, and it's not in your best interest to try to figure that out. And I'm not even positive it's not your job. You should advise them to have an attorney to look over it. I've had cases where an attorney has looked over it at least 10 times and redlined it 10 different times before we came to an agreement. And all I was doing as a middleman was literally receiving it from the attorney and sending it to the other broker, back and forth. I never touched anything other than saying, here's what we're doing. Can you agree to this? And then finally we came to an agreement. But that's just kind of an example of how long and extensive that these leases can be drawn up to look like. And then as far as commission goes on how you calculate, so 4%. So in this case, Mackenzie, if you don't mind going back to page 1. Okay, so you're going to take the 4% of all base rents for all 5 years. So if the base monthly rent for year 1 is $27,126, you would add that up 5 times, because in this case it didn't change. And then you would take that whole number and times that by the 4% to get your commission. So it is lucrative to do commercial leases, especially if it's a longer term. And then of course, if it's more expensive lease. But that's how you would calculate your commission if you were agreeing to 4% of base monthly rent, which is pretty standard.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So we've got the lease, it's all good. We've calculated it. We know we're getting our commission based on 5 years. Because you put that renewal in there, you're her agent when she renews and gets the commission at that point again, correct?
If you have the option to renew in the lease.
Right, which if we put it in the LOI, hopefully they'll carry it through. And
yes. Yeah,
okay.
and I've had an agent before on the separate brokers, there's a commission agreement. Sometimes they'll want you to sign. And he said, yes, if they renew, you get paid, but you have to be a part of the renewal process. So they're not just going to send the lease directly to your client and you not be there 5 years from now anywhere in the loop of having them sign the lease kind of thing, and you get a check miraculously in the mail. So a lot of times they might say, yeah, you're going to need to be involved in the renewal process. Yeah.
Right,
Sometimes
but are they going to send the lease directly to the client, or are they going to send it to you in 5 years? Because if they're represented they should always assume they're represented and talk to you first, right? I would think that would be the fair and ethical thing to do if you wrote it in there that way.
Yeah, so it would be, right? But I'll tell you that I already marked my calendar for whenever my client's lease is getting close to ending. and talking to them and asking them if they're going to renew, and then calling that agent up and saying, yeah, they're ready for their renewal paperwork, because I just know this person, this agent. And in commercial, it's not quite as regulated, I wouldn't say. So I would definitely, if that's the option that you get and they sign off on, I would go ahead and just make yourself a mental note or a real note to be involved at that time. Yeah. Yep.
Payment sometimes comes half and half too, right, Evan?
Yes. So in this case, it half of it's delivered upon execution, and then the other half is delivered when the lease commences. So if it is a 4-month of free rent, you're not getting paid for quite a while. And in this deal here, these brokers and their clients, they're not always getting paid by their client very quickly. So that means you're not getting paid very quickly. So it's a lot of like, sometimes it can be calling them multiple times. Where's the check? Where's the check? Where's the check? I mean, it could take a while. Sometimes they're great and they're right on top of their game. But 9 times out of 10, it's probably not the broker. It's probably the landlord they're not paying out to them first, kind of thing. Yep. Anybody else have any questions?
Can you send us copies of this LOI as an example? Because there was some verbiage that you had in it that I didn't have in mind that I actually liked. So I was hoping to cheat and copy.
Yeah, I have several with a lot of different verbiages that I can send you. And I wouldn't necessarily, if you're going to do free rent, if you're not going to do free rent, I wouldn't do year 1 to year 2 on the dates. Again, though, I honestly actually forget that. It doesn't matter because this is not what's going to be a binding deal. It's just like I said, you get the point. But you might go ahead and put January 15th to
Right.
January 14th and then January, you know what I mean? Like go ahead and do it by the calendar year.
I have asked for rent abatement over a certain time. So instead of for the 4 months free rent up front, like I might ask for 6 months rent over the next 12 months. So that way my tenant's only paying half the rent for the first 6 months.
Like
It
to
depends.
prorate
Sometimes
it
they
out.
sometimes they like that. Sometimes I'll specifically ask for it if they're not going to give tenant improvements.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's also some really good YouTube videos about commercial leases, and it's not talking about having an agent, just because so many deals happen in commercial that are just a small business owner going and calling the number, and they're dealing just with the landlord. There may be no agent involved on either side, and people just aren't aware that they're already expecting that you're going to ask for that free rent, or you're going to ask for that TI allowance, or you're going to substantially ask for a lower rate. So there really are some good YouTube videos of just like how you should go into a deal, and you can use that as an agent too on how to represent your client. Yeah. Well, I don't think I have anything else on my notes that I can think of.
This was very helpful. Thank you, Evan.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad it was helpful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Does everybody have Evan's contact information, Evan's phone number to reach out to her?
You put it in the
put
chat?
it in the chat.
Awesome.
I will tell you, and maybe some of you have already heard me say this. After watching Evan with her commercial clients, with specifically commercial lease clients, I will never represent myself in another commercial lease, and I'm a dang broker. I'm passing it off to Evan. I don't know how this chick gets what she gets for her clients, but I want to be her client.
Well, that was sweet, Lori. Thank you. Thank you. And it really, I enjoy commercial. I think it's fun. And it's completely different. So it's almost like doing two jobs if you're doing residential and commercial, which is kind of cool because then you get to break it up and all of that. But yeah. I put my email and my phone number in there if anyone has any questions. And then Tanya, I can send you some different examples of LOIs that I've done.
Thank you, Evan.
Evan, is it okay with you if because I'm gonna send all of y'all plus the others that weren't here this recording, can I include these 2 PDFs with that?
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay, cool.
And you also might see on the offering packets, you might notice that the rate is already broken down monthly. So you would just, if it's like $1.12, you know that that's a monthly rate, not a yearly rate. That used to get me when I first started. I was like, why are these numbers so different? I'm in the same location. One's $22, one's $1.12. I don't get it because they're just dividing it, differently. So.
I've seen it listed that way on the MLS. It'll say $2 a square foot, and I'm going, wait, that doesn't make any sense because the guy next door is asking for $22. Like,
Yeah.
they just do it backwards.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yep. Yep. Another thing I would say is your client may not really be too aware of what they need. Sometimes they might need like a standalone space and they think that they might be sending you that all these spaces they think are standalone, and it really is just like 500 square feet in this building. Or maybe 200, and they think that it's the whole thing. So just kind of keep in mind that could happen quite a bit too. That people think they would be getting to rent the whole entire deal, but it's just like a space within it. That happened a lot to me too. So, all right. Well, that's all I have.
Thanks again,
All
Evan.
right, well, thank you, Evan.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much for doing this for us, Evan. We appreciate it.
Of course, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're kind of good. You might need to become a teacher now.
Well, I always thought I wanted to be a teacher growing up, like a third grade teacher, but that didn't happen.
And
You
we're
can-
like a bunch of third graders, so you got lucky.
Oh, no. What? No.
You can teach realtors. It's like herding cats.
I can see that.
All right. Thank you again, Evan. I appreciate you doing this.
All right. Thank y'all.
Take
Talk
care.
to you later. Bye.
Uh-huh.
Bye.